Adam Whitty. Welcome to season 2 of Build Your Authority. How are you, sir?
Joe Pardavia. I am great, and I am so excited for season 2 of Build Your Authority.
And I miss that. It's been a few months since I've heard the dulcet tones of Adam Whitty say my name, so I'm really excited about kicking off season 2. And we are kicking off season 2 with a proverbial bang. We're not just going to come out with a average episode. We've lined up a pretty big name and someone who now has taken a big part of the Authority Company, right, Adam?
Yeah, I am so excited about this episode. Our guest, Joe, is Don Yaeger. Don is the new publisher of Forbes Books, so he has officially joined forces with us at Forbes Books and Advantage, the Authority Company. And when I share with you his background, you're going to understand why we wanted to have him a part of our team. You know, aside from being a Hall of Fame keynote speaker, speaking to 500,000 people per year. He is listen to this, Joe, 12-time New York Times bestselling author of over 40 books, host of the top-rated Corporate Competitor podcast. This is a guy that has done more to help entrepreneurs, famous athletes, and business legends tell their stories in a compelling and articulate way. This is the master storyteller of all storytellers, which is why I'm so excited to have him here. And he has built an incredible personal brand for himself and has worked with so many athletes and so many entrepreneurs and leaders that have also built incredible authority brands too. So I'm just so excited to have Don with us. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Don Yaeger too, Adam, when you made the announcement, Don's one of those people you know but don't know. Like, he is so synonymous with books that you're like, Don Yaeger, yeah, of course. There's probably a Don Yaeger book. If you're watching this podcast, you have a Don Yaeger written book somewhere on your bookshelf. So he is synonymous with building authority, entrepreneurship, a great storytelling. So without further ado, Don, welcome to Build Your Authority.
Joe, Adam, can't wait. Adam, I want to hear you do my name that way one day so that I could feel like I'm in a cage match at WWE or something. I mean, like, you've got
Don Yaeger in the house.
Wow. Now I don't feel so special anymore, Don. Thank you.
So Don, let's jump right in. And I want to start with the topic of storytelling.
Awesome.
You have been called America's greatest storyteller. You are the storyteller in residence for National Geographic. You travel the globe teaching executives the art of storytelling and how to be better storytellers. It's an art. Let's help our listeners by unpacking this a bit. Obviously, you started your career in journalism. How did your experiences as a reporter initially, as the associate editor of Sports Illustrated, how did that background kind of shape your approach to storytelling and leadership?
Well, dramatically. It had everything to do with why I was so busy trying to learn the craft. Because, the one thing about being in media is, today they'll put headlines on to try to get you to click on something, right? I'm a little more old school than that. And so from my window of time, the way you got more readers was you wrote good stories, right? And the way you wrote good stories was you knew who you were writing for. And so I think one of the great, it's not a great mystery, but it's one of the great misses of most people who are trying to tell a story is they don't know enough about their audience. They don't know who they're trying to tell their story to well enough that they can shape the story for the listener of that story. And that's where I think media gave me a great head start. I had to know who I was trying to reach in order to make sure that I got enough attention to the work I was doing, that I kept getting a chance to do more of it and at a higher level. And so really connecting and understanding my audience became the first and most important thing that I think a career in media gave me.
So, Don, you work and we work with many business executives and leaders around the world. And I have heard you say many times that great leaders are great storytellers, right? And being able to connect with your audience, whether that is your employees, whether that is your customers, whether that are prospective customers, right? One of the best ways to do that is through storytelling. So I think you gave us the first nugget, which is know your audience. But
Mhm.
what are the components of telling a great story?
Well, so I argue that the two greatest misses, I put storytelling, the elements of a well told story, kind of on a bookshelf, right? It's my preferred visual. It's like yours. I like it. And on the one end is that idea, like, what do you know about your audience? Why do they need to listen to you? What is it that you have to offer them uniquely, that allows you to become the vessel, through whom your story is delivered to them. But on the other end is that most storytellers, don't have a true, understanding of a call to action, right? When I'm done reading your story, listening to your story, hearing you speak, what what do you want me to do, think, or feel, right? And if I don't know in advance what I want you to do, think, or feel, I probably am not gonna deliver the story that gets you to do that. So, a great part of storytelling is being, is thinking about telling that story deeply before you even begin to tell the story. Who am I telling it to, right? What do we have in common? How can I draw them into a relationship with me? And then once they hear it, what do I want them to do, think, or feel? And if I'm not clear on that, they're not going to be clear on that. And so, let's apply it into the world of writing books. One of the great challenges is that too many authors say, I want to write this book for everybody, right? If you write it for everybody, you're writing it for nobody. And so one of the first exercises I have done for almost every book I've written, maybe the first couple I didn't fully appreciate this, is I actually have a whiteboard next to my writing station, where I will actually imagine the avatar. I'll draw the avatar of who I see as the reader of my book. Like, who's going to read this book? Who will I be targeting with this book? And get as specific. I mean, I even get down to what kind of who do they follow socially? Like, who are the people that they're watching, their social behaviors and watching their social media posts. I want to know or imagine that person so that as I'm telling the story, writing the book, I'm thinking about that avatar because that's who we're going to be trying to get to buy the book. And then, or we want the book to end up in their hands, right? Whether it's bought or given to them as a gift. But then secondly, I also want to know what I want that avatar to do with this book. What do I want them to be inspired to go believe they can achieve after reading it. And if I can know those two things, and literally I'm looking at one, Coach Bob is one that I've got up on the wall right over there right now. He was the reader of a book that I was working on, and he's 45 years old. He's a competitor. He's values based. He loves personal growth, but he feels like he should be further ahead in his career than he is right now. I mean, literally, that's the level of detail I got into. And as I was writing that book, every time I would get to a portion of it in which I was trying to make sure I was thinking about my reader, I looked at Coach Bob and said, what does he need from what I'm getting ready to do right now?
Wow, that's profound. Joe, you're like Don, a journalist yourself. Obviously, you spent most of your career in radio broadcasting. Don spent most of his career in print journalism. But man, this amount of preparation is what I'm hearing is really the key differentiator that sets you apart.
Yeah, and it's funny too, Adam, because you mentioned, in past episodes, and you've talked about this, the riches are in the niches. Don's been doing that before you even heard of that phrase. He's been doing it for so long. So, Don, Tell us about that hyper focus because you're going so deep. Because some people will be like, "Yes, my target audience is CEOs 54 to 64, and I think this is." But you're going way deeper. Tell someone who's watching this or listening to this why it's important to go that deep.
Well, for two reasons. One is it reminds you regularly, I gotta make sure Coach Joe is gonna get what he paid 24.95 for, right? And is he gonna get that? But secondly, once the book is complete, I know where to go find Coach Joe, right? Because as I said, I've even broke it down. I know that he follows John Maxwell, Simon Sinek, and Peyton Manning, right? So, I know who he's interested in. So if I want to go look for my reader, the person I literally targeted this book at, I've got a running head start, right? Most people are
Wow.
going, gosh, I'm not really sure where to go find my reader because I'm writing for everyone. You know what I mean? Everyone is my reader. And that as a result, anything I do should generate sales. No, that's absolutely, the worst strategy, the least effective strategy. The more niche you can get, right? To try to piggyback on Adam's line there, the better you're going to be at finding that reader once you're done.
Wow. So, Don, for the entrepreneur that's listening or watching right now, I think most are probably saying, okay, I get it. Yeah, storytelling is important,
Hmm.
but very few would consider themselves gifted at storytelling. So,
Mhm.
for somebody that's starting at zero, what are a few things they could do to begin to improve their competency and capability in being a storyteller?
Well, first off, I would tell you that there is no such thing as a naturally gifted storyteller. So I've spent 30 years studying the very best storytellers in the world. In fact, going to spend time with many of them to try to understand, like, what do you do? When I listen to you do this, when I see you pull people in, what's your strategy there? And I'm literally been a student of this art form.
Mhm.
And the beauty of it being an art form is it can be learned, right? So
Mm.
that's first is, if you want to be better at something, what do? You go find somebody who's good at it. You try to study their behaviors, success. You look for the clues to success, right? And as you do that, so study. That's the first thing. Identify good storytellers and look for what you can. Try to dig into that. Find other storytellers who teach the art of it, right? And go learn from those folks. And then I would say probably the most important thing that someone could do when they're trying to most people think storytelling is about me because I'm the storyteller, right? No. And that's absolutely the worst thing. The storytelling is about you, the listener. And if I can't figure out if my story is all me, right? Then what'll ultimately happen is it becomes really boring very quickly. It's so self-absorbed. I lose your attention and largely your respect, right? Because you're thinking, wow, that guy thinks of no one but himself. So the best stories are you stories, right? So one of the elements I teach and that we talk a lot about when you're in storytelling mode is what we call reversing the I-you ratio, right? Which is most stories are, I did this, I did that, I'm amazing. Just ask me. Um, but if I can take the story, even the very same sentence, and take I out of the sentence and put the word you in instead, requires some requires a little work. But when I do it, you hear the same sentence differently. I mean, one of the examples I use often when is like, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. There I was, the top of the world's greatest mountain. It was amazing. But what if I reversed it and said, you can only imagine what it was like to stand atop the world's greatest mountain. You can only imagine what you could see if you opened your eyes to the world below you. So it's the same thing. I'm telling you that I'm on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, but instead of me talking about me, I'm challenging you to envision what I saw. And in that reversal, simple as it is, putting you in the story instead of me in the story, what you find is a higher degree of retention, a higher degree of attention, and an ability to you earn the right to be heard differently.
Hmm. That's profound.
How often does he say profound? Because that's the second one I've got.
It's not very often, so, his profound meter is going off the charts on this one,
All
Don, so
right, good.
he doesn't throw profound willy-nilly,
I want to be high on the profound meter when this is over. This is good.
So, Don, you are the host of the top-rated corporate competitor podcast, and your guests on that show are legends. Dan Cathy, chairman of Chick-fil-A, Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines, Condoleezza Rice, former Secretary of State. So you have spent time and interviewed some of the biggest and best business legends of all time. When you look at all those people that you've spent time with, what common traits have you observed among these leaders who have also been able to successfully build a strong personal brand too?
So I would tell you, surprising answer might be is an uncanny connection to humility, right? An understanding that for all of their incredible achievement, um, that there are others who are equally, or maybe even in some cases more so responsible for that achievement, and a willingness to share that. Um, when I encounter a leader who's very much letting me know how great they are, how much they've achieved, um, I, I immediately kind of measure them against some of the others. Brian Moynihan at Bank of America, some of the others that we've had a chance to talk to over the last 4 years. By the way, I'm told that I'm supposed to say at this stage, subscribe, like, or whatever, right? There's supposed to, I can't remember. There's 3 things I'm supposed to tell people to do every time you mention the podcast. And my 16-year-old son is really good at telling everybody to do it. But the one thing I love about it is that as you dig into, and my lane, that I try to occupy as I talk to executives who played sports. My goal is to actually learn more about what sports taught them about being a better leader. And so it's a conversation most of them aren't generally having, right? They're usually, every time they're interviewed, it's about profit and loss statement. What's the shareholder reaction going to be to this result? And I'm talking about their high school football coach, right? I'm talking about a lesson that happened when they were, when they got yanked from a game, or they threw an interception, or they did, whatever it might have been. And so I love it because we're kind of digging into places that most of them don't typically spend time. But the best part about it is it's that journey that as they're talking about it, they realize that you don't become CEO of Delta just because you dressed well and look good on a video in the front of the, on the screen in front of you, on the seat in front of you. Ed Bastian is a fantastic human who loves to share credit. And, he actually has he calls it the virtuous cycle. There are a lot of people who say if you're a leader, your first and most important responsibility is to your customer. Ed Bastian says my first and greatest responsibility is to my employee. And if I treat my employee well, if they're happy to be coming to work here every day, what will ultimately happen is they will treat the customer well, who then the customer will reward me with greater market share, which then allows me to take care of my employees. So his virtuous cycle kind of is a little different than some other leaders that I've encountered. I love it. I mean, it's just a great conversation, but it's often very deeply rooted in a recognition of others.
I'm hearing you say, Don, that the strongest personal brands that you see of other leaders are those that don't have a beat their chest, look at me, but it's really a, hey, look at all of the people on my team.
Right. And the more you do that, the more people look at you,
Right.
right? Because it's not just others looking at you, it's your team looking at you too, going, "Hey, thanks, boss. Like, I got that. Thank you. That was good." Um, you know, uh, I had David Novak on. I recorded with David Novak yesterday. He's um, the founder and CEO of Yum Brands, right? Kentucky Fried Chicken, Taco Bell, all this. I mean, over 1 million employees. And his entire discussion was around how he learned to celebrate others, and how he told us a fantastical story about this employee who he encountered when he was early in his career as a leader. He had a room full of people in a beverage distribution plant and a Pepsi distribution plant in St. Louis, and he's asking them, "Well, how do I learn how to do this and this and this about the industry?" And they kept talking about this particular guy, right, Bob, and before it's over, he realizes Bob is in the room, but he notices it because Bob starts crying, and he says, "All these people are talking about you, Bob. Why are you crying?" He goes, "Because I've been here 47 years and I did not know that my team felt this way. The people felt this way about me." He says, "And I'm retiring in 2 weeks." So there's I mean, so as David's telling the story, you're understanding his goal from that point forward was that there would be no Bobs in PepsiCo, right? That in his division of the company, that every Bob needed to be celebrated and celebrated, spontaneously, not waiting for some moment or, you know, employee meeting to do so. But the lesson is so powerful for us as leaders, right? But it's told through story, and David was fantastic in sharing it.
Don, you've got really big CEOs and leaders that are actually coming to you and asking to be on your podcast. You only record 50 weeks a year, so you've got very limited inventory on who you choose to have on your show. So when you're looking at the personal brand of that CEO, what makes a leader more attractive to you? And what are the attributes that might make a leader less attractive to you, or you'd say, I think I'm going to pass on having them on my show?
Well, I think so. We do almost 10 hours of research into every leader before we actually even give them before we go through the process of scheduling dates, right? So, and in that, one of the things we're always looking for are, um, you know, truthfully, I mean, ethical missteps, right? I mean, were there windows of time? Um, and by the way, there's some that you might have that, but what they learned from it changed the trajectory of who they are. There are others where you realize that's just who they are, right? And so, yeah, I think what you're looking for as much as anything is this someone, because I feel like you guys do, right? I feel a responsibility to those people who are listening to the podcast every week, to make sure I'm giving them something, and I'm going to give them something that will make them better. And if I'm feeding them something that maybe is if the banana's a little brown, right? I probably shouldn't be, inviting that person to be a part of the conversation with those I'm my audience, right? I know who my audience is. I know what I'm trying to deliver for them, and I know what I want them to do, think, or feel at the end of every session.
So, Joe, I'm going to let you referee the next section because this is one of Don and I's favorite topics.
Oh no, don't go there.
Well, I'm not going there, Don.
Oh, thank you.
We're talking about books, Don. We're talking
Oh,
about
good.
books.
I thought you were going to go Clemson, Florida State. It's ugly. It's
Oh,
ugly.
no, no, no.
Clemson doesn't have much to be proud about these days, Don. So don't worry about it. It's
Well,
all good.
don't worry, my Florida State Seminoles have even less, so sadly, that's kind of where we are.
That's true. And I'm a college dropout, so I have no dog in this fight. So let's talk about some of the books.
The college dropouts won more games this year than my Florida State Seminoles, so good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's talk about some of these books you've written. I mean, over 40, some of the biggest stars on the planet. And, some of them are household names. I mean, for the average person, for the sports fan, everyone knows who they are. But, the Walter Paytons, the John Woodens, the Deion Sanders. Um, how did it happen for you? Because you became the go-to guy for writing books with sports legends. I mean, if there's a sports legend book in a bookstore, there's a very good chance that your name is on that cover. How did that happen?
So it really you named the reason right there, Walter Payton. So I was young in my career, and I was at Sports Illustrated. I had met Walter at an event. I'd gotten to know him a little bit. We spent a little time together, and a few years later, he gets sick. And the world knows he's sick, but nobody knows how bad because he kept it quite quiet. And then as it happened one day, I'd written a story for Sports Illustrated. It landed me on Oprah Winfrey's show. So I'm on with Oprah. And Oprah's show, it's recorded one day, the particular show I was on, and it was going to run the very next day. So I come home. I'm here in Tallahassee where I live, and I'm hosting an Oprah Winfrey watching party at my house because that's what everybody does. And it's 4:00 in the afternoon. Got all these folks at my house. It's a few minutes before before it starts. The phone rings. Buddy of mine answers it. Hands me the phone. Says the caller on the other end says he's Walter Payton. Now I knew Walter's voice well enough to know. I thought it might be somebody playing a trick. Got on the phone. It was Walter Payton. And Walter said, I need to do a book, and I need to do it now. He said, I've been interviewing writers, haven't connected, but I saw you on Oprah because Oprah runs earlier in Chicago than it does anywhere else in the country. So I saw you on Oprah today, and he said, it reminded me that you're my guy. Would you come help me tell my story? So I go to Chicago because you don't say no to Walter Payton. And he tells me that he's going to die and that he didn't know how long he had to live. And he asked me to live with him. And I spent the last 10 weeks of Walter's life with him. And then wrote his autobiography, Never Die Easy. And in doing that book, it changed my life because from that moment on, other athletes said, if Walter Payton trusts you, I trust you. Because sometimes, Adam, you talk about authority, being transferred, right, by who it is that you're spending your time with. And Walter Payton gave me authority that I couldn't have worked my entire career for. And from that moment on, big athletes would say exactly that. I want Walter Payton's writer.
Did you ever ask Walter why you, though, Don? You mentioned the fact that he'd been through it. I mean, I'm sure you have to be like, what? I mean, sure, the Oprah magic rubbed off on you, but what was it about you, Don Yaeger?
It was connection. It was just that he felt comfortable with me. Like other writers had an agenda in his opinion, and he knew my agenda was his agenda. And we had been friendly, but I wasn't clearly on the list of people he was calling to initially write his book because he had all these big names that he was trying to, and I was not a big name. And but he felt that he had like a sense of comfort in my presence. And if you can make people comfortable, it's amazing what can happen. Walter changed my life.
We call it authority by association. And after that book, you were a made man, right?
You go. You could use a little mafia terms. This is really like I got all of Adam's. I got all the love today.
You got the best of the best today.
So Don, what role does authorship play in building somebody's personal brand?
So some people, authorship is an opportunity to explain themselves, right? To maybe, some people are the only way they get a chance to have their voice heard is through. It's not as true today with social, but through the media, and the media can bring its own filter to everything they do.
Right.
Being an author allows you to own the media, right? For you're the you determine what the content's going to look like. You determine what the story is going to be. You have to be truthful. You have to, but you may have an explanation for something that has not been fully shared because you've had to lean on someone else to do the telling for you. In this particular case, you get a chance. So it allows you to tell people things they may not in fact, it should allow you to tell people things they wouldn't otherwise know. And in doing that, they become closer to you. They become more willing to believe in you. They become more open to whatever it is you might be suggesting because people feel, if you do it right, people feel like they know you when it's over.
So Don, I mentioned earlier in the podcast, you speak to 500,000 people a year. And one of the things that you have shared with me in the past is that, bar none, at the end of every speech, there's a line of people next to the stage saying, I want to write a book. Can you help me? Similar to storytelling, what I found is a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders, they say, I want to do a book, but they have no idea where to begin and how to start. What advice do you give that person?
Well, the advice I give them is to, frankly, the advice I give them is, there's no greater gift sometimes to yourself than telling your story, right? There's often the opportunity it's very cathartic for some people, right? But one of the things that I don't think most people recognize is how hard it is, right? We're talking about I've written 40 and you guys publish 200 a year, soon to be 400. But in that process, most people think it's just, and so I encourage people to sit down and begin writing. And I want them to try some of it before they actually ask me to help them. Because you'll find people and they'll slave over something for hours and hours, and then suddenly they'll hit save and they'll realize they've just written 800 words or 1,000 words, and a book's 60, right? 55, 40, whatever the number is going to be, but it's a great multiple of what they've just written. And that's when you realize I don't ask, I don't try to do certain things around my house. Trust me, I don't. My wife has a great list of people who do. And, but there's a reason, because I'm not a pro at that, but I am a pro at this. And so after somebody figures out how difficult it is, sometimes they actually have a greater appreciation of adding a pro to their team.
Joe, this sounds like you and I. My wife, Erin, has a list of people to call for everything, none of which has my name associated with it.
Yeah, ditto, Adam. There's someone literally in my house right now painting because she doesn't trust me to do that. No joke. There's someone right now in my house painting. So yeah, I feel you.
Jeanette, my wife, when we started dating, she opened up a cabinet at my house, and there was a sheep there, and she's like, "What is this?" And I went, "Oh, that's the tribe, right? That's the people that make this house work." And she's going through it, and she says, "There's a guy here that's the scratch and dent guy." Like, and I went, "Oh yeah, I mean, if you got dogs, you scratching the floor and things, you got to have somebody who can fix these things. So I have a scratch and dent guy." And she realized then how pathetic I was. But you know what? I write well, and I
Yeah.
speak.
Well, Adam, I don't want to pick the thread on because I think people might be confused because we talk about the riches and niches earlier in the podcast, and that Don really drills down on who the reader is. Yet you have a dozen New York Times bestsellers. So
Mhm.
how do you can we connect those dots? Like, how are you writing for a ultra niche human, and that translates into bestsellers, which require more than a niche audience? Can you explain that for me? Because someone maybe was like, I don't get it. I don't get it. So Don, explain, please.
Well, because sometimes your niche audience can be pretty big. So I've written 4 books that have sold over a million copies, right? And Adam will tell you, I mean, that's an enormous number. And each one of the years that those books appeared, it was, they were the best-selling book in their category for that entire year. Um, but the niche that I was in, right? For example, a couple of them, there were 3 of them, they were on U.S. history, right? So, but I told U.S. history factually, but I wrote it as a novel. I wrote it like you would read it like a novel. So the experience, I knew that what I wanted people who appreciated history, U.S. history, but that wanted to make it readable. And when you define that as your audience, right? So I'm not writing for academics. I'm not writing for people who want to read, you know, um, the wherefores and thou arts, right? I was writing it in a way that made you feel like you were in a movie, but it was true, right? And the ability to do that, it was a niche, but a very large niche, right? Sold 1,000,003 the first time. I mean, it's a lot of books and continues to sell, which is crazy. 8 years later.
It's funny, Don. One of my favorite business books of all time, that was really written about my good friend Alan Mullally. It's a business book, but it reads like a thriller, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it's a page turner, and very often, or very rarely, would I ever find a business book that read like a page turner that I just couldn't put down. And that's an art, right? To be able to write in a way where it's a nonfiction topic, but it becomes so addictive that you just don't want to go to bed. You just want to keep reading because you're excited to find out what happens next. I mean,
Right. But so, Joe, just to make sure I'm clear on that, when we say niche, right, or niche, however you want to pronounce it, I'm more sophisticated than Adam, and so when you say niche, it doesn't mean small, right? Sometimes people mistake those 2 words, and they're not the same. Like, you can have a very specific target, but it can be large, and if you do it well, then that target will reward you, and I've just been lucky to have 12 of them.
so Don, let's tie this into speaking.
Mm.
You speak 65 times a year, 500,000 leaders each year are exposed to one of your keynote speeches. Certainly, speaking is very much a pillar of building your authority brand, right? Many entrepreneurs and leaders would love nothing more than the opportunity to get on stage and share their message with others. How does an entrepreneur leverage their personal brand to have the opportunity to get on stage and start speaking? Because you're $1 million speaker 65 times a year, but I know it didn't start that way.
No. It's funny, we look back 13 years, which is when I started speaking 13 years ago. I mean, I lost money the first year. I mean, because if you paid my gas money, I'd come speak for you. So a big piece of it is, I mean, just as in almost anything, right? The way you get good at something is you do a lot of it. And so I knew I wanted to do this. I knew I wanted to explore the ability. Most writers are not good speakers for a reason, right? There's a reason why we hide behind a keyboard. And I wanted to learn if I could translate my skills to a different space. And so I went out and sought coaching. But the one thing I learned was the more you speak, the more you speak, right? And so I was constantly, in the early days, I would speak for anybody and everywhere, just for the practice time, the ability to get better. There's too many people, I think, and I encounter them all the time, executive leaders who go, well, yeah, well, if they pay you that amount of money, imagine what they'll pay me, because I'm a big dog, right? I'm bigger. I'm a bigger name than you are. Well, I appreciate that, but I've worked to get to this number. and you want to start at that or above, chances are not always that good that you're going to be able to do it for very long. If you have to build up, right? You just as in anything else, you start at whatever fee you think you can earn, and then you keep growing it. And I think one of the challenges that too many people overvalue themselves and their story. Um, I, uh, I, I worked to try to keep it the other way around.
And Adam, it's funny too because we have people come and work with us, and they'll be like, I want to speak." And the first question we'll ask is, "Well, where have you spoken?" "Oh, nowhere. I just want to speak." And we're like, "Well," and you kind of just went there. You kind of have to take it on the chin a couple times, do it for free. They may pay for your gas money if you're lucky, but a lot
Maybe.
of times it's just struggling and just doing it for nothing.
Yeah, and I think the golden thread that I'm picking up on in this conversation, Don, is if a leader wants to build their personal brand, like it takes real dedicated work. It doesn't just happen.
No, it doesn't. There's work in the writing of a book. There's work in building a speaking a platform career, right? There's work in being thought of as a thought leader, right? Yes, you were a business leader. Are you a thought leader? There's two different things, right? Um, and and a business leader, just like truthfully, most athletes who want to go. I mean, I've had a lot of athletes who've literally flown to this office to sit down to say, how do I do that, right? How do I? They're not. They're willing to do the work to be a great athlete. They don't want to do the work to be a great speaker. They want to be able to parlay their fame into riches post career. And what they realize is that it doesn't take very long for the reputation in all of those people in the speaking world, they all talk to each other, right? And if you're good and you're easy to work with and you deliver content that has takeaway and you are gracious to the audience when the speech is over, if you have all of those things in line, your work, the name starts spreading. If you are unprepared, if you I was on a stage once with an NFL Hall of Famer, one of the best players in the world, and he for 40 minutes mispronounced the name of the company, right? And I literally I was sitting next to the CEO of the company, large, major international company, and every time the name he froze because he couldn't believe that he was paying this guy all that money to mispronounce the name of his company because he just wasn't prepared. Now, this is a guy who is legendary for his preparation skill on the field of football. He was lousy on a stage, and he doesn't get very many speaking engagements these days because that's his reputation.
Hmm. What a powerful lesson. Uh, Make the connection between speaking and books, right? I mean, it seems like they do go hand in hand. That when you write a book, the best way to promote and sell books is by having the opportunity to speak. And every time you speak, if you have a book, probably you're going to have a lot of people that want to go buy that book.
Right, absolutely. I mean, we do several $100,000 a year right now just in back of room book sales. At the end of speeches, and that's not counting when companies pre-buy the books, right? Pre-buy them for the audience. So, yeah, there's complete synergy there between the two because having a book gives you some credibility as a speaker, right? You're immediately seen in a different category, but then it also gives you a product that you're no longer just focused on, are you going to sell them a speech? Now you're also selling them a secondary product, which is, and then the number of times I've been hired because someone was walking through an airport, bought one of my books, and came home and was like, wow, I mean, well, would I love to have this guy speak to my company? The number of times that has happened is untold.
Joe, Don talked earlier about humility. We've also talked a lot about authenticity. Let's kind of talk about how entrepreneurs, can build their personal brand by being give back oriented,
Hmm.
right? Don, you of course have spent a lot of time on the board of directors of the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Hmm.
You just joined the board of directors of the V Foundation for Cancer Research. What role does giving back, what role does kind of social responsibility play in a leader building and crafting their brand?
S- So I'm gonna turn the question around a little bit on you, because I think if the reason you're doing it is to build your brand, then then that's inauthentic and it will come through pretty quickly, right? Um, if you're doing it because what you're getting a chance to do truly is a reflection of what matters to you, and is an opportunity for you to feel like what God's blessed you with is something you're able to turn around and return, um, that shows up too, and that shows up authentically, and that is attractive, and people appreciate that, um, and I mention, like, the charities that I work with in presentations. Why? Because I want people to come up and ask me about Make-A-Wish. Like, I wanna I get tears in my eyes every time I talk about that organization, but I wanna encourage them to be involved as well, right? There's nothing in it for me I mean, I'm like, I don't get paid by Make-A-Wish to say, but if I could share with somebody that this matters to me, and I hope it matters to you by the time you're done listening to me, and I can then make that connection for you, then check that mark. That's a good day.
Yeah, going back to authenticity
Mm,
being the key word there.
yeah.
Uh, as we come to a close, I want to talk about.
I just want to say something profound one more time. I like to be
A lot of pressure on you, Don. I don't know.
profound
Okay.
day. No, no, no. I actually thought the last one was pretty profound, but he didn't give it to me. So I'm
Don, I told you he doesn't just throw those around. He does not throw profound around, Don.
You've got one more big opportunity.
whew,
So
okay.
so so
Bring it
so
on.
so here we go. I want to talk about pivots.
Hmm.
Um, Many of the athletes that you've worked with, they were pivoting in their career from being a professional athlete to, walking off the field or the court for the last time, and then having to figure out what their next is.
Hmm.
A lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with at Advantage, at Forbes Books, it's a similar situation. They have started and grown a business. They've just sold their business. They're thinking about, what's next? Do I want to start a new business? Do I want to tell my story? Do I want to be a speaker? Do I want to be a coach? Do I want to be a consultant? Right? What advice do you have to that business leader, that entrepreneur that is at that pivot point? Because you have seen so many people do it. Some have done it exceedingly well. Some have utterly failed. What lessons have you observed?
So, in my effort to be profound, I'm going to share with you that I've also done it as well, right? Remember, I was a writer and I pivoted to become a speaker. I was a magazine journalist and I pivoted to become a long form book writer. So the one thing I always say to people is that if that is an idea in your mind, begin the pivot before the pivot is required. Yeah. So use the platform you currently have worked to build to get you a running head start on what you might do with it after you've exited that platform. If you are if you're one of the things I say to athletes is, a number of them that I've talked to over the years who've said, "Yep, Don, I want to write a book after I retire." It's like, that's the wrong time. Like, write it while you are still, someone that people are talking about on a regular basis. If you're a business leader, you know, uh, don't wait, right? Don't wait and think, you know what, I'll do this 5 years after I retire. Do it while there's still, um, I don't want to use this improperly, but there's still a little bit of the glow around you, right? Because of what you built or what you've achieved. So whether it's while you're still in place as the leader of that organization you founded, or whether it's closely thereafter, the sooner the better, because the longer you wait, the harder it is to get. I mean, to get the benefit of what you were doing beforehand. Profound.
Yeah, I think that's pretty profound. Don, this has been a very profound conversation. If folks want to learn more about you, where's the first place to start?
Well, so donyaeger.com is, and by the way, I own multiple spellings of my last name since it's often misspelled, but it is Yaeger. Corporate Competitor Podcast.com. Subscribe, like, review, whatever.
That's it. You
All
got him.
Is that it? I got it.
You got the three. Yep.
That's 3 for 3. And as Adam alluded to at the very beginning, we're partners now. So if there's an opportunity to work together with you as you get ready to tell your story, know that I'm there.
Awesome. Don, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Don, absolutely incredible.
Thanks, Adam.
And that wraps up episode 1 of season 2, Adam. A very profound episode, to say the least. But we're going to keep it rolling this year in 2025. Our next episode is going to be about blogging. So we're talking about long form stuff with Don, but we're going to move over to blogging with one of the writers on our team, Mark Gillespie. So give us a little thumbnail about blogging and why that's important for authority building.
Yeah, so if you want to write 45,000 words, you first got to master writing 400 words. And so this idea of short form copy, number one, it's really important for search engine relevance. And if you're not able to be found online, you don't have an authority brand. So becoming relevant online, short form copy is a big driver of success there. But also, there is this great opportunity to parlay your blog into a book. And so we're going to talk about that as well. So this is a really important topic.
Awesome. Adam, I'll see you next time.
Joe, thanks so much.